In 2019, in Memphis, with under $300 in my pocket, I took a dead box truck somebody had left rotting behind a shuttered auto shop and turned it into a home with light, a fan that actually moved air, water I could drink, and a corner where I cooked a hot meal every night. For almost 2 years, the people who cut through that lot on their way to the bus stop walked past my door 100 times and never knew a fully working home was running quietly behind that rusted roll-up. I am going to tell you exactly how I did it. Not because I am proud of needing to, because the engineering behind it is so cheap, so available, and so quietly powerful that once you see it, you will never look at your own power bill or your own rent the same way again. And the part that actually keeps the whole thing running, the single piece of gear that turns a metal box and a gravel lot into something you can call home, cost me less than $30 at a pawn shop on Lamar Avenue. I will show you exactly what it is, but only once you understand the mistake that almost killed me in my first winter. Because if you skip that part, you will copy the wrong half of the lesson. Stay with me, because the same engineering that made my box truck livable for nothing is the exact engineering that would keep your house running if the grid went down for a week, if your rent jumped $400 next renewal, or if you ever decided you wanted a place of your own that nobody could take from you. The first night I slept in that truck, it was 41 degrees outside, and the metal walls ticked as they cooled, one slow pop at a time, like the whole shell was settling around me. I lay on a foam pad I had pulled out of a curbside couch wrapped in 2 moving blankets from a thrift store on Summer Avenue, and I listened to that ticking for hours. I was not afraid. That surprised me more than anything. For the first time in 8 months, I had a door I could close, a roof that did not leak, and a space that belonged, in the only way that mattered to me. The truck itself cost me nothing. It had been sitting on flat tires behind that closed garage for over a year. Registration expired, title lost, the owner long gone. I asked the man who still leased the lot if I could clean it out in exchange for keeping whatever I found inside. He looked at me for a long second, shrugged, and said as long as nobody complained, he did not see a truck back there at all. That was the whole transaction. No paperwork, no money. Just an understanding between 2 tired men that the truck was, for as long as nobody made noise, mine. What I want you to understand is that Memphis at that time had a subsidized housing waiting list that stretched past 2.5 years for a single adult with no dependents. The cheapest studio I could find inside the city limits ran $640 a month before utilities, and you needed first, last, and a deposit to even sign. I had $1,100 to my name when I lost my last apartment. The math did not work. It was not going to work. So I stopped waiting on a list that was never going to call my name, and I started building. The body of that truck measured about 7.5 feet wide by 16 feet long inside. That is 120 square feet of floor, which is more than some Tokyo apartments people pay $900 a month for. The walls were corrugated aluminum with a thin fiberglass liner that had mostly rotted out. The roof had 2 soft spots I patched with roofing tape and a tube of self-leveling sealant from a hardware store on Poplar. Total cost of the patch, $18 and change. But a metal box in a Memphis summer is an oven, and a metal box in a Memphis January is a freezer. That was the problem the whole build had to solve, and almost every dollar I spent went into solving it. Insulation is what separates a shelter from a home. Without it, no amount of solar power or clever wiring matters, because you will either cook or freeze before you ever get to enjoy the lights. Here's where the field knowledge came in, and where I learned the first hard lesson. I started by stuffing the walls with whatever soft material I could find. Old clothes, packing foam, scraps of carpet pad from a flooring dumpster behind a strip mall. That was a mistake. Loose material like that has an R value of maybe 2 or 3 per inch on a good day, and it sags, settles, holds moisture, and grows mold inside 6 weeks. I learned that the wet, sour way by waking up one November morning to black spots crawling up the inside of my back wall. I tore it all out, every bit of it. And I started over with rigid foam board, the pink and blue stuff you see stacked behind construction sites. Contractors throw away cutoffs by the truckload. I spent 3 weeks walking job sites in East Memphis at the end of the day, asking foremen if I could take the scrap pile. 8 out of 10 said yes and looked relieved I was saving them a dump run. Rigid foam board carries an R value of about 5 per inch, and I doubled it up to 2 inches on the walls and 3 inches on the roof and floor. That gave me roughly an R15 envelope on the sides and R15 above and below, which is better than the code minimum for an attic in most of the southern United States. That insulation cost me the price of construction adhesive and aluminum tape to seal the seams. $46 total, and it changed everything, but insulation alone is half the story. The other half is what engineers call thermal mass and stack effect ventilation, and this is the part the off-grid blogs almost never explain properly because most of the people writing them have never had to sleep through a real summer with no air conditioner. Thermal mass means having something heavy inside the space that absorbs heat slowly during the day and releases it slowly at night. In a desert, mass keeps you cool by lagging the temperature swing. I use 4 or 5 gallon water jugs I kept along the back wall, partly for drinking water and partly because 200 pounds of water sitting in the shade absorbs a tremendous amount of daytime heat before it ever reaches me. Stack effect ventilation means cutting a low intake vent and a high exhaust vent so that hot air rises out the top and pulls cooler air in from below. Without a fan, without a single watt of electricity. I cut a 4-inch round vent low on the front wall and a 6-inch round vent high on the rear roof. Both screened, both covered with rain hoods. I bent out of an old aluminum sign I pulled from a dumpster. Total cost, $12 for the screens and a tube of caulk. On a 96-degree afternoon in July, the inside of that truck stayed at about 82. With a small 12-volt fan running on the cheap power station I am about to tell you about, it dropped to 78. That is livable. That is the same temperature a lot of people set their thermostats at to save money. And I was running it on a system that costs less than 1 month of their utility bill. Now, if you are watching this thinking it could never be you, that you have a job and a lease, and none of this applies, stay with me. Because the part that matters most to you is the one I would reach for if you ever woke up to a dead grid, a rent hike you could not absorb, or just the simple, quiet wish to own a piece of something outright. The electrical heart of my home was a refurbished portable power station I bought at a pawn shop for $28. It was a small unit, 220 watt hours, the kind of thing campers buy for car trips and forget in the garage. Paired with a 100-watt folding solar panel I found at a yard sale in Cordova for $15, it ran a small LED light strip, a USB fan, my phone charger, and a tiny 12-volt water pump. That is everything I needed. 220 watt hours sounds tiny, and it is, but listen to what it actually does when you stop wasting it. An LED strip pulls about 3 watts. Run it 6 hours, that is 18 watt hours. A USB fan pulls 4 watts. Run it 8 hours, that is 32 watt hours. A phone charge from empty to full is about 15 watt hours. A small 12-volt pump running 30 seconds at a time a few times a day is negligible. Total daily draw, under 100 watt hours. The 100-watt panel, even on a mediocre Tennessee winter day with clouds, brings in 200 to 300 watt hours. I was never once short of power. Not one night in 2 years. Now think about your house. Think about how much of your power bill is heating water you do not need, hot lighting rooms you are not in, running a refrigerator that opens 20 times a day, and standby drain from devices nobody is using. The average American household pulls about 30 kilowatt hours a day. I lived on less than 1/30th of that and was warm, lit, fed, and charged. The difference is not magic. The difference is that I counted every watt because I had no choice, and you have never had to. If the grid went out tomorrow for a week, a $60 setup like mine would keep your phone, your lights, your fan, and a small radio running indefinitely. Most people spend more than that on a single dinner. Water was the next piece, and it was simpler than anyone believes. I caught rainwater off the truck roof. The roof measured about 7 feet by 16 feet, which is 112 square feet of catchment surface. Every single inch of rain on that surface yields about 70 gallons of water. Memphis averages roughly 54 inches of rain a year. The math is almost cruel in how generous it is. I never came close to using what fell on that roof. I ran a length of gutter I cut from an aluminum downspout somebody had thrown by the curb, sloped it into a food-grade 55-gallon drum I found at a restaurant supply auction for $9, and filtered the water through a 2-stage ceramic and carbon filter I bought online for $22. That filter is rated for 6,000 gallons before replacement. I never replaced it. I tested the output water with a cheap kit, and it came back cleaner than what comes out of a lot of municipal taps. But the mistake I told you about, the one that nearly killed me, came that first winter before I had any of this dialed in. I had insulated the truck poorly with all that soft junk material, and one cold January night, I lit a small alcohol burner inside the space to warm up some soup and take the edge off the cold. I had sealed the truck up tight against the wind. I had no ventilation. I did not understand yet what stack effect was or why it mattered. I ate my soup, lay down, and woke up 2 hours later with a headache so severe I could not see straight, my heart pounding, my hands numb. I crawled to the back door and pushed it open and lay in the gravel, breathing cold air for 20 minutes before I could stand up. That was carbon monoxide. That was how close I came to not waking up at all. Any combustion inside a sealed space, any flame, any fuel, any heater that is not specifically designed and invented for indoor use will kill you. It does not take much. It does not give warning. The truck that almost became my home almost became my coffin in the same week. I never used open flame inside again. From that point on, every bit of heat I generated came from the sun heating my thermal mass during the day, from insulation holding it through the night, and from a small 12-volt electric blanket I ran for an hour before sleep off the power station. That was it. That was enough. The cooking happened outside on a small twig stove I built from a coffee can. Under a tarp awning I rigged off the back of the truck. Free fuel. Every broken branch in the lot. A pot of rice and beans cost me about 40 cents to make and fed me for 2 days. So here is the climax. Here's the piece I told you about at the start. The single highest leverage thing I ever bought, the part that turned all the rest of it from a survival situation into an actual home, was that $28 pawn shop power station. Not because the unit itself was special. It was a generic Chinese brand, nothing remarkable. What was remarkable was what it represented. Until the mid-2010s, a battery pack that could store 200 watt hours of usable energy and discharge it cleanly through a USB port and a 12-volt socket cost $300 or $400 new and weighed 20 pounds. By the time I found mine, the lithium-ion revolution driven by electric cars and laptops had crashed that price by 90% and shrunk the weight to 4 pounds. The secondhand market was flooded with units that campers had bought, used twice, and abandoned. Pawn shops did not know what to do with them. They sold them for the price of a tank of gas. And the man who sold me mine, an older man who had worked 30 years as an electrician before his shop closed, was the one who explained to me what I was actually holding. He sat me down on a folding chair behind his counter and drew the whole circuit out on the back of a receipt. He told me what to run, what not to run, how to size the panel, how to keep the battery from dying early by never draining it past 20%. He spent 40 minutes teaching a stranger something he could have charged a consulting fee for. He told me his father had wired farms in West Tennessee in the 1940s, before rural electrification reached them, using car batteries and windmills, and that what I was about to do was the same thing his father had done, with better parts and a cheaper price. That knowledge was handed down to him, and that afternoon he handed it down to me. I am handing it to you now. The whole system that keeps a home running, light, climate, water pumping, communication, costs under $100 if you know what to buy and where to buy it. A used power station from a pawn shop or an online resale site. A folding solar panel from a yard sale or end of season clearance. An LED strip. A USB fan. A small 12-volt pump. A rain barrel and a ceramic filter. Rigid foam insulation pulled from contractor scrap piles. 2 vents cut into the right places. That is the whole list. That is the whole home. The reason you have never heard this laid out plainly is not that it is secret. It is that nobody who lives on the grid has any reason to learn it. The utility model and the rental model and the mortgage model all depend on you believing that a working home requires a working bank account and a working credit score and a working relationship with a landlord or a lender. None of that is true. It is convenient. It is what most people choose, but it is not required. The physics does not care what your credit looks like. The sun comes up the same on a paid-off mansion and a rusted box truck behind an auto shop. I lived in that truck for almost 2 years. I left it the spring I found steady work again, and the last thing I did before I walked away was leave the power station, the panel, and a handwritten note inside, in case whoever found the truck next needed it more than I did. I do not know if anyone ever did. I hope they did. If you are the kind of person who believes the most important knowledge is the kind nobody teaches in a classroom, you already understand why this matters, especially with where rents and power bills are heading in this country. You do not have to be desperate to learn what desperation teaches. You just have to be willing to listen to somebody who already paid the tuition. So tell me something. Of everything I just walked you through, the insulation envelope, the stack effect ventilation, the rainwater catchment, the pawn shop power station, if you had one weekend and $100 right now, which system would you build first? Drop it in the comments. I read them. I answer the ones I can. And if you want to know what I built next, because I did not stop with that truck, the next story is about the rainwater and filtration system in detail. The exact filter, the exact barrel, the exact way I kept the water from going green in a Memphis summer, and how the same setup would give a family of 4 drinkable water for a week if their taps ever went dry. Subscribe and you will not miss it. This channel is for people who refuse to believe a decent place to live has to cost a fortune, and who would rather know how to build one than hope they never need to.